15 years ago, my name was Daniel Costa. I was 20 years old, broke, unemployed, and running out of reasons to believe my future would ever look different from my present. I had traveled to a small town in Pennsylvania after hearing that a local construction firm needed an administrative assistant. All I carried with me was a worn backpack, a few sets of clothes, a recommendation letter, and the stubborn belief that if I worked hard enough, eventually life would give me a chance. That chance disappeared before I even got there. The position had already been taken. For the next 3 weeks, I walked through every corner of town searching for work. Diners, repair garages, warehouses, gas stations, motels, grocery stores. Everywhere I went, the answer was the same. No, the little money I had vanished quickly. The owner of the boarding house where I rented a room allowed me to stay a few extra nights out of sympathy. But I understood something important. People struggling themselves can only extend kindness so far. By the end of the 3rd week, less than $10 remained in my pocket. I couldn't even afford a bus ticket to leave. That afternoon, I sat alone in a small town park. There was an aging fountain in the center, a few wooden benches scattered beneath maple trees beginning to change color, and several weekend vendors selling coffee, flowers, and homemade pastries. I chose the bench farthest from everyone else. My backpack rested beside my feet. My elbows were on my knees. My eyes stayed fixed on the ground. I wasn't crying. I felt worse than that. At least tears prove you're still reacting to something. I felt completely empty. I was thinking about leaving town despite having nowhere to go. I was thinking about abandoning every dream I had ever carried. Not dramatically, not tragically, just quietly letting go. That's when a voice interrupted my thoughts. "Sorry, I don't mean to bother you." I looked up. A girl stood a few feet away. She looked about 16. Dark brown hair tied with a blue ribbon. A white apron dusted lightly with flour. In her hand, she carried a paper cup of coffee and a slice of lemon cake wrapped neatly in parchment paper. She smiled gently. "You've been sitting here since my mom opened the stall this morning." She pointed toward the nearby vendor stands. Most people don't stare at the ground that long unless they're hungry or sad. She tilted her head slightly. "My guess is you're both." I immediately frowned. Pride arrived before gratitude. "I don't need charity." She didn't seem offended. Instead, she carefully placed the coffee and cake beside me on the bench. "Good thing." She smiled again. "Because this isn't charity." She pointed at the cake. "It's lemon cake. Completely different category." For a second, I didn't know what to say. There was something calm about the way she spoke. Something impossible to argue with. Eventually, I picked up the cake. Not because I wanted help. Because hunger was beginning to hurt. She sat down at the opposite end of the bench, leaving enough space to respect my discomfort. "My name's Sophia Mendez," she said. "My mother runs that bakery stand over there." I followed her gaze. A woman was arranging pastries beneath a red and white striped canopy. "Daniel Costa," I replied, and that was the beginning. From that day forward, I kept returning to the park. At first because I had nowhere else to spend my days. Later because Sophia was there. She never treated me like someone who had failed. Instead, she asked questions. What did I want to become? What kind of work excited me? Why hospitality? Why keep chasing that dream when my situation looked hopeless? One afternoon, I finally told her the truth. I wanted to build hotels, not giant luxury towers. Small places where guests felt welcomed. Places where staff remembered names. Places that felt human. I wanted cafes filled with conversation, real coffee, real food, and real warmth. When I heard myself say it out loud, it sounded ridiculous. A broke 20-year-old carrying $10 and talking about owning hotels. But Sophia didn't laugh. She simply said, people who know exactly what they want to build usually end up building something. Then she looked directly at me. People who've already given up don't talk that way. I stared at her. She was 16 years old, helping her mother sell pastries. Yet somehow she spoke with more certainty than anyone I had met in years. The days continued. I kept returning. I told myself it wasn't for food, but honestly, it was for her company. Whenever extra coffee remained, she brought me a cup. Whenever there were oddly shaped pastry slices, She handed them over and called them bakery mistakes. Neither of us believed they were mistakes. In return, I helped unload supplies, carry boxes, arrange tables, and stack chairs at closing time. We talked endlessly about the future. Sophia dreamed of opening a bakery of her own someday. Nothing huge, just a place filled with stories, where every recipe meant something. Then everything changed. An old friend contacted me. A logistics company in Chicago needed an operations assistant. The position wasn't glamorous, but it was real. The interview was scheduled within 3 days. If I got hired, I could finally rebuild my life. The problem was simple. I needed money, transportation, food, temporary housing. Altogether, around $700. Money I didn't have. That Saturday afternoon, I told Sophia about it, trying to sound casual. Maybe it wasn't meant to happen, I said. I'll keep looking around here. She didn't answer immediately. Sophia always had a strange silence, the kind that felt like she was calculating possibilities nobody else could see. The next morning she arrived earlier than usual. In her hand was a plain white envelope. She extended it toward me. There's $700 inside. I froze. Sophia, no. She nodded. I saved it over the last 4 months. Absolutely not. What were you saving for? She glanced toward her mother's stand. A new mixer. She smiled softly. The old one barely works anymore. Then she looked back at me. But that machine can wait. Your opportunity might not. I couldn't even bring myself to touch the envelope. I can't accept money from a 16-year-old. Her expression became serious. Then, don't accept it from a 16-year-old. She gently pushed the envelope toward me. Accept it as faith from one person who believes in another. Then she handed me something else. A small piece of notebook paper, torn carefully from a school notebook. Written in blue ink were 6 words. Go far. I believe in you. I read them again. And again, my throat tightened. One day I'll come back. I'll repay everything. I'll thank you properly. Sophia smiled. Her smiles always arrived before her words, as though kindness moved faster than sound. I know. Then she pointed toward the road. Now go. You have a future waiting. I left town Monday morning. We didn't say goodbye at the station. We said it beneath the maple tree in the park. I boarded the bus carrying an old backpack. $700, a slice of lemon cake wrapped by her mother, and a tiny piece of paper with 6 unforgettable words. That night, I placed a note inside my wallet. I had no idea it would remain there for the next 15 years. And I certainly didn't know that the girl who wrote it would become the person I searched for longer than anyone else in my life. 15 years can transform a broke young man into someone newspapers call self-made. But I always knew the truth. I wasn't self-made. I had been rescued by a 16-year-old girl, a paper cup of coffee, a slice of cake, and $700 that should have purchased a mixer for her mother's bakery. I arrived in Chicago and got the job. From that day forward, I worked with desperation. I arrived first, left last, learned everything: accounting, operations, customer service, vendor negotiations. Years later, I entered hospitality. I purchased a struggling motel, cleaned it up, focused on warmth, focused on people, focused on making guests feel remembered. The motel succeeded. Then came a second, then a cafe, then a boutique hotel. By 35, I owned Costa Hospitality. Boutique hotels and cafes spread across Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, and New York. People call me successful. They call me visionary. But nobody understood where it truly started. Everything began with a girl who asked one simple question: what do you want to build? For 15 years, I searched for Sophia. I returned to the town repeatedly. The bakery stall was gone. The vendors remembered fragments. Some remembered Sophia's name. Others only remembered the girl with the ribbon who sold cake beside her mother. I hired investigators. 3 different times. I searched business licenses, school records, social media accounts, market permits, and public databases. Every lead ended the same way: wrong person. Once I drove hours because I saw a bakery stand at the same striped cloth. When I arrived, the woman behind the counter was a stranger. Still, I never stopped carrying that note. The paper had become fragile with age. The folds nearly tore through. I eventually sealed it inside thin plastic, yet it remained inside my wallet. Before important meetings, I would read those 6 words. Go far. I believe in you. I had gone far, but I still hadn't found a person who sent me there. My mother, Teresa, knew the entire story. She still lived in Pennsylvania and refused every offer to move into one of the homes I bought for her. She always said old roots belong where they grow. Whenever I visited for dinner, she asked the same question. Still searching for that girl? I usually avoided answering directly, just looking into future business opportunities. She never believed me, but she never pressured me either. She simply looked at me the way mothers do when they know their children carry debts that money can never repay. Inside my company, only one person truly understood my schedule. Emily Parker, our marketing director. Sharp, professional, brilliant. She helped transform Costa Hospitality into a recognized brand. She had worked beside me for 4 years, and although she never said it openly, I knew she cared about me far more than business required. I respected her and trusted her judgment, but there was still a locked corner in my heart I never fully opened. I didn't know if I was still waiting for Mariana, or just waiting for the moment I could finally thank a memory properly. Then Alma Hospitality announced a new project in Maple Falls, Pennsylvania, a quiet town with an old downtown core, brick sidewalks, a small central park, and family-run shops with hand-painted wooden signs that looked like they hadn't changed in decades. I chose it for business reasons. Growth potential, weekend tourism, location stability. That was what I told my team. But the moment I arrived, something felt off in a way I couldn't explain. Not a memory, not recognition, just fragments. The scent of fallen leaves after rain, the sound of the bell above a shop door, sunlight hitting old glass windows at a certain angle. It felt like I had been here before, even though I knew I hadn't. What I didn't know was that Mariana Silva was already living there. After her mother passed away years earlier, she had taken over a small bakery called Mari Sweets. It wasn't impressive by industry standards. A few tables, cream-colored walls, glass displays filled with cupcakes, tarts, cookies, and orange cakes, and an old stand mixer that had clearly been repaired more times than anyone could count. The shop wasn't wealthy. Some months barely covered rent and ingredients, but it was alive, warm, steady, the kind of place where people didn't just buy food. They stayed a little longer than they needed to. Locals loved her. She remembered names. She remembered orders. She remembered small details people didn't even think mattered. We were in the same town without ever knowing it. Fate didn't announce itself. It arrived through something ordinary. The hotel's opening event was scheduled. A high-end dessert supplier from New York canceled at the last moment due to a transport failure. Suddenly, everything was at risk. We had 48 hours. Panic spread through the events team. Then someone suggested casually, "There's a small bakery nearby, Mari's Sweets. Not fancy, but the quality is actually really good." I barely registered the name at first. Mariana accepted the order. She worked without proper sleep for 2 days straight. Lemon tarts, mini chocolate cakes, butter cookies, vanilla cupcakes, and, without explanation, trays of orange cake made from an old family recipe she rarely used. On opening night, I walked past a dessert table. I picked up a slice of orange cake without thinking much. The moment I took the first bite, I froze. The flavor wasn't just taste. It was memory, orange zest, soft butter texture, a glaze slightly uneven at the edges, a warmth I couldn't place. And suddenly I wasn't in a hotel anymore. I was sitting on a wooden bench in a small park 15 years ago. It wasn't a clear memory. It felt like something opening inside me that had been locked for years. I called over one of the event managers. "Who made this?" "The owner of Mari Sweets," he said. "Mariana Silva." The name hit me strangely, not like recognition, like disturbance. My heart reacted before my mind did, but I pushed it down immediately. Mariana Silva was too common a name. I had chased too many ghosts already. I refused to hope again. I want to meet her. I said, when she stepped out from the kitchen. She still had flour on her hands. Her hair was tied back with a deep red ribbon. She looked about 30 now, calm, composed, different, and yet something in her presence felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. But I did not recognize her. Not truly. She recognized me instantly, but she said nothing. I extended my hand. Lucas Almeida, your cake is incredible. She shook my hand gently. Thank you. It's an old family recipe. I nodded. It tastes like a memory. For a brief second, something shifted in her expression. A flicker, almost emotion, but it disappeared quickly. Good food usually carries memory, she said quietly. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary. That sentence. I had heard something almost identical a lifetime ago, but the thought slipped away before I could catch it. All I felt was an unfamiliar familiarity I couldn't explain. That night, Mariana left the hotel quietly. She could have told me everything then. She could have said, asterisk, I am the girl who gave you $700 15 years ago. Asterisk, but she didn't, because she didn't want gratitude to define what came next. She wanted something more honest. She wanted to know if I would still see her as a person without the weight of the past shaping everything. So she stayed silent. And I, the man who had spent 15 years searching for her, started falling for her without realizing she was already the person I had been looking for. The next morning, I went to her bakery before work. I told myself it was only to say thank you, only business, only courtesy. But the moment I stood outside the glass window, smelling butter, coffee, and orange glaze, I already knew that wasn't true. She was behind the counter, carefully decorating a small cake. When the bell rang, she looked up. Good morning, she said. Coffee? Or are you here for more cakes? Just coffee, I replied. She nodded. Sit wherever you want. I chose a table near the window. She brought the coffee and placed a slice of orange cake next to it. I didn't order this, I said. It wasn't sellable, she replied calmly. It was cut wrong. I looked at it. It was perfect. Where exactly is it wrong? In the baker's standards, she said. I laughed before I even realized it. And that surprised me more than anything else that morning. It had been years since something so simple felt natural. I came back the next day. Then the day after that. At first it was just coffee. Then conversations. Mariana didn't behave like anyone in my world. No performance. No pretense. No interest in status. Just questions that felt heavier than business meetings. What part of your hotel actually feels alive? She asked once. I started talking about systems. Efficiency. Brand design. Operations. She shook her head slightly. I didn't ask what makes it work, she said. I asked what makes it feel like it means something. That question stayed with me longer than I expected. Very few people ever asked me that. Most asked about profit margins, occupancy rates, expansion strategy. I told her about my cafes inside the hotels, about staff trained to remember guest names, about working with local bakeries instead of mass suppliers. And then, without thinking, I said something I hadn't said in years. When I was 20, I was sitting in a park with nothing. Someone gave me a slice of cake. That moment made me believe people could still be good. Mariana listened quietly. She didn't tell me she already knew. She only asked softly, "Did you ever find her?" I touched my wallet instinctively. I've been searching for 15 years. At first, I thought I needed to repay her. But I think now it's not about money. I just wanted to know she mattered. Mariana lowered her gaze slightly. Maybe she already knows. Her voice sounded different when she said it. Not distant, not casual, almost heavy, but I didn't understand why. Those mornings slowly became routine. 8 a.m. sharp, same table, same coffee, sometimes business, sometimes stories, sometimes silence filled only by the sound of espresso machines and knives cutting cake behind the counter. I started noticing things. The bakery's old freezer struggling, loose shelves, rising ingredient costs. Mariana never complained. She simply adapted. Less variety, smaller portions, higher discipline, and somehow the same warmth remained. Helping her directly felt wrong. So I helped quietly, ordered her cakes for meetings, recommended her bakery to partners, added her shop to our approved vendor list, spoke her name in rooms she wasn't in, never told her, but she noticed. One morning, there was a folded note next to my coffee. Asterisk, thank you for the things you think I don't see. Asterisk, I read it twice. The handwriting felt strangely familiar, almost like something I had seen long ago, but couldn't place. That night, I placed it inside my wallet, next to the old note from 15 years ago, still unaware that both pieces of paper carried the same handwriting. And slowly, something unspoken between us began to grow. One rainy afternoon, I stepped into the bakery and immediately noticed the spice shelf had collapsed. Glass jars lay shattered across the floor, cinnamon and spices scattered like dust across the tiles. Mariana told me not to come in. There's glass everywhere. Stay back. But I was already inside. I knelt down and began carefully moving the larger pieces out of the way. You don't have to do this, she said quietly. I know. She froze. Not angry, not surprised, just still. I didn't understand at the time, but those two words seemed to hold weight I couldn't explain. Only later did I learn why. 15 years earlier, she had said almost the same thing when she handed me that envelope. We worked in silence, cleaning the floor together until nothing but faint dust remained. Then we sat at the counter, side by side, watching rain slide down the glass window. The world outside blurred into soft gray motion. I broke the silence. Are you happy here? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed on the rain. Finally, she said, this place gives me purpose. This town gives me roots. But happiness, it's not something that simple. Then she turned slightly. What about you? What are you still missing? I hesitated. The question felt heavier than it should have. She continued looking outside. Sometimes I just want someone who shows up before the storm hits. Not someone who tries to fix everything. Just someone who sits there and stays until it passes. I didn't respond, but something in me shifted because I knew, without being able to explain it, that I wanted to be that person. Vanessa noticed a change in me before I ever admitted to myself. She saw the morning visits. She heard me mention Mariana's name in conversations that had nothing to do with work. She noticed the way my attention drifted toward the town center from my office window. One afternoon, she went to the bakery alone. Mariana later told me Vanessa was polite the entire time, but every sentence carried something sharp beneath it, wrapped in elegance, but still sharp. Lucas is a very important man, Vanessa said carefully. His world is large, very fast. People sometimes misunderstand attention like that. Mariana simply looked at her. Would you like another coffee? Or are you finished here? That calm response unsettled Vanessa more than anger would have. After that, Vanessa started digging. She collected fragments. Old supplier debt. A rejected business proposal Mariana had once sent to an Almeida hospitality branch years ago. A small increase in bakery revenue after I arrived in town. More customers linked indirectly to hotel traffic. None of it was fabricated, but none of it told the full story either. Vanessa didn't lie outright. She did something worse. She rearranged truth until it looked like deception. When she placed a file on my desk, I made a mistake I would regret. I didn't ask Mariana. I didn't confront her. I trusted paper more than presence. And I trusted silence more than truth. I didn't get angry. I withdrew. That was worse. I still went to the bakery, but I spoke less. I stayed shorter. I avoided her eyes even when she looked directly at me. She noticed immediately. One morning she placed my coffee down gently. Is something wrong? I looked at the cup instead of her. No, just work. It was a lie that sounded too clean, too rehearsed. Mariana didn't press further. She simply nodded and walked back behind the counter. And somehow her silence hurt more than any accusation could have, because part of me wanted her to fight back, even though I hadn't given her a chance to defend herself. But Mariana wasn't that person anymore. At 16, she had given trust freely. At 31, she had learned not to beg for belief. The charity event for the new hotel took place on Friday night. It was meant to support local vocational programs. Business leaders, journalists, council members, and Almeida hospitality executives filled the room. Mariana was hired to handle all desserts. She arrived early and set everything up herself. Lemon tarts, mini chocolate cakes, butter cookies, vanilla cupcakes, and, almost unconsciously, trays of orange cake placed right at the center. I wasn't there at the start. I was in Detroit signing a contract. I wasn't due back until the next morning. Vanessa managed the event in my absence. Around 9 p.m., she stepped onto the stage. Her speech began polished and familiar. Opportunity, community, responsibility. Then her tone shifted. We all like inspiring stories, she said. But sometimes stories are not what they appear to be. Sometimes people see opportunity and step into it wearing vulnerability like a mask. The room changed instantly. Silence spread. Mariana stood near the dessert table. She understood before anyone else did. Vanessa never said her name directly. She didn't need to. She spoke in fragments. A bakery with pastet. A proposal sent years ago. A sudden rise in exposure after connecting with hotel leadership. Each sentence carefully structured. Each word designed to avoid direct accusation. But the meaning was obvious. Eyes in the room slowly turned toward Mariana. Whispers followed. Confusion, judgment, discomfort. Mariana didn't defend herself. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She placed the tray down slowly, removed her gloves, picked up her bag, and walked out. No hesitation, no panic, no collapse, only dignity. She gave no one the satisfaction of watching her break. A junior staff member, Raphael, recorded the end of the speech on his phone, not for entertainment, but because he knew something about it felt wrong. When I returned late Sunday night, he sent me the video. I watched it once, then again, and again. Every time I reached the moment she walked out of that room holding her head high, something inside me tightened painfully, not only because I wasn't there, but because I realized I had done something similar without even noticing. I had accepted someone else's version of her without ever asking her own. I called Vanessa at nearly 2 a.m. Explain what I just saw. A pause. I was protecting the company. No, I said, you humiliated her in front of everyone. She used you, Vanessa replied. Silence fell between us. Then I said, tomorrow morning, I want every document you used reviewed. Every single one. The next day, I went through everything myself. It took less than an hour for the entire narrative to collapse. The proposal Mariana sent years ago had been a standard business inquiry. It was simply lost in filtering systems. Her debt wasn't manipulation. It was old financial strain she had been paying off quietly for years. The increase in bakery traffic wasn't engineered. It came from genuine hotel exposure and natural customer flow. Vanessa hadn't invented lies. She had assembled fragments into something that looked convincing enough to destroy trust. And that made it more dangerous than a lie. I went straight to Mari's Suites. The lights were off, chairs stacked, door locked, empty. Next door, an older shop owner told me Mariana had returned the keys the previous day. She was leaving for Boston in 3 days. Night bus, one-way decision. Something dropped in my chest. I drove back to the hotel and reviewed every document again. By morning, I knew exactly what had happened. I called an emergency board meeting. Vanessa was removed from all responsibilities and asked to leave the company shortly after. There was no public spectacle, no humiliation, just consequence, clear and final. But none of it mattered in the moment because Mariana was still gone. I called her. No answer. Texted. No reply. Returned to the bakery. Empty again. Her friends only confirmed it. She was leaving Wednesday night. Before going to the station, I went to my mother's house. I needed to tell someone everything. Maybe because she was the only person who had ever known the full story of the girl I searched for. Or maybe because, deep down, I felt everything was finally circling back to that original moment, but something was still missing. My mother listened quietly as I spoke. About Mariana, about the bakery, about the orange cake, about the words, Astra's good cake is cake that has a story inside. Asterisk about the red ribbon. About the thank you note with handwriting I can never forget. When I mentioned the red ribbon, my mother suddenly stood up without saying a word. She walked into her bedroom and opened an old shoebox she kept on the highest shelf of her closet. Inside were photographs, folded letters, and small memories she had preserved from the years when I was still struggling. She carefully pulled out a faded photograph. "I kept this from when you first sent it after you started working in Chicago," she said softly. I took it from her hands. It showed me at 20, thin, tired, wearing an old jacket, a worn backpack hanging off one shoulder. Behind me was a bakery stall in the park with its red and white checkered cloth. Mariana's mother stood behind the counter, and at the edge of the frame, a 16-year-old girl with a red ribbon in her hair was smiling. I stared at her. Then I looked again at Mariana's face in my memory. The world didn't just slow down. It collapsed into silence. My hand started shaking. I reached for my wallet without thinking. I opened the hidden compartment and pulled out the old note I had carried for 15 years. Asterisk go far. I believe in you. Asterisk, I placed it next to the photograph. And then I saw it, the handwriting. It was identical to the note Mariana had left under my slice of orange cake weeks ago. My body gave out. I sat down hard. My hand covered my mouth as everything inside me broke at once. I wasn't the man who stood in boardrooms anymore. I wasn't the man investors listened to without hesitation. I was just the same 20-year-old kid again, the one who had once had nothing. And now I understood the truth I had been blind to for years. She had never left. She had been there all along, serving coffee, listening, standing in front of me every morning. And I had never truly seen her. My mother placed a hand on my shoulder. "Go," she said quietly. "Find her." I didn't hesitate. I ran. The Maple Falls bus station showed a departure to Boston at 8 p.m. When I arrived, the clock read 7:48. And there she was. Mariana stood in the boarding line, backpack on her shoulder, a small suitcase beside her. Her hair was down, no red ribbon. For some reason, that absence felt like I was losing her again. I called out her name. "Mariana." She turned, not surprised, not shocked, just still, like part of her had already been waiting, and the other part had already accepted leaving if I never came. I walked toward her, holding the photograph and the old note in my hands. My fingers were still trembling. I placed both into her hands without a word. She picked up the photograph first. The moment she saw herself at 16, standing beside her mother's stall, red ribbon in her hair, her eyes filled instantly. Then I placed a note over it. "I kept it," I said quietly, "every single day for 15 years. She looked at the words. Asterisk go far. "I believe in you." Asterisk tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. "I knew it was you," she said softly, "from the opening night." I nodded. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get air. "Then why didn't you tell me?" She looked down for a moment. "Because I didn't want you to love me out of gratitude. I didn't want to be the girl you owed." She raised her eyes again. "I want to know if you could see me without the past. The woman I am now. The one who struggles. The one who works. The one who still has fears, debts, and dreams that don't look perfect." Her voice trembled slightly. "I wanted to know if you could love me as I am today." I stepped closer, my voice breaking. "I do. I love the woman who makes coffee every morning like it matters. I love the woman who remembers people's names. I love the woman who doesn't break when the world tries to humiliate her. And I love the girl who saved me, not because she gave me money, but because both of them are you." She closed her eyes. More tears fell. "I'm sorry," I said, "for not recognizing you, for doubting you, for believing a piece of paper more than the person who stood in front of me every day. I forgot the first thing you ever taught me, to trust before I judge." Mariana looked toward the bus. The doors were still open. The driver was calling final passengers. "I was going to leave," she whispered, "not because I stopped loving you, but because I didn't want to stay somewhere I had to prove I wasn't something I'm not." I shook my head. "You don't have to prove anything anymore." Silence. Then softly, And you? I held up the old note. I already had my answer 15 years ago. I just didn't understand who gave it to me. A tearful laugh escaped her. You really searched for me all this time? Private investigators, small towns, farmers markets, old records. I once drove 3 hours because I thought I saw a red checkered cloth. She let out a broken laugh. You're insane. Yeah, I said, but I never stopped. She laughed again, then cried harder. I stepped forward, stopping just short. Can I hold you? She didn't answer immediately. She just looked at me. Then she stepped forward and fell into my arms. We stood there in the middle of the bus station, people passing, announcements echoing, luggage rolling. But none of it mattered. 15 years collapsed into that one moment. The bus to Boston pulled away without her. 3 weeks later, I reopened a cafe inside Maple Falls Hotel. This time, I didn't hide anything. I stood in front of employees, partners, and townspeople, and I showed the photograph. I said, people see me as a businessman, but everything I built started when I was hungry and hopeless. And a 16-year-old girl gave me coffee, cake, and every dollar she had saved. When everyone saw failure, she saw a future. I looked at Mariana sitting in the front row. She didn't save me with money. She saved me with belief. And sometimes that is enough to change a life. I didn't propose. I didn't turn it into a performance. I simply told the truth and apologized for every moment I had failed to protect her. After that, everything grew slowly. Naturally, we never rushed anything again. Mari's suite stayed exactly as she wanted. Small, warm, handmade, filled with the smell of butter and oranges. A place people didn't just visit. They remembered. She eventually joined my company too, but not as a label or attachment. She became a quiet voice in our bakery division, a reminder that no matter how large something becomes, it must never lose its soul. 6 months later, we opened a vocational center in Maple Falls for teenagers without direction, for adults starting over, for anyone who needed a second chance. We taught baking, coffee making, hotel operations, basic finance, interview skills. We called it asterisk one slice of cake. Asterisk on the main wall. We placed the old photograph. Below it, a single line. Asterisk a small act of kindness can change an entire life. Asterisk the original note. Asterisk go far. I believe in you asterisk was no longer my wallet. Mariana insisted it be preserved properly. Now it rests between glass and the center, still visible, still fading slightly, still powerful. One afternoon I asked her, if you could go back to 16, would you still help me? She smiled. Yes, even knowing it would take you 15 years to recognize me. Then she added softly, maybe I'd even add one more sentence. What? She tilted her head, looked closer. I laughed and pulled her into my arms. And in that moment, I finally understood. Our story was never about a man finding the woman who saved him. It was about a kindness that never disappeared. It traveled through time, through mistakes, through distance, until it finally came back to where it started, and I had gone far. But in the end, every road still led me back to the first person who ever believed in me.